So, have you ever looked at the European Union, this massive, complicated thing, and just wondered, how in the world did this get built? Well, today we're going to unpack that incredible story, piece by piece. Think of it like a grand architectural project for an entire continent. After the absolute horror of the Second World War, this wasn't just some philosophical question. It was the most urgent, practical problem facing Europe. The continent was in ruins, and the old ways had clearly failed, twice. A totally new approach was needed, and fast.
And the idea they came up with was, well, kind of brilliant. To stop historic enemies like France and Germany from ever going to war again, you take the very things you need to make war, coal for energy, steel for weapons, and you weave those industries together so tightly that fighting becomes not just unthinkable, but as they said, materially impossible.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start in the ashes of the war, then we'll look at the actual economic blueprint they drew up. After that, we'll see how treaties were used to build the thing up, look at the inevitable growing pains, and finally, check out where the EU is today and what might be next. All right, let's start at the very beginning. We're in post-war Europe, a continent of rubble and ruin, where a radical new idea is just starting to form. The leaders back then knew that securing a lasting peace meant tying their economies and political futures together. You gotta remember, they were also caught between two new superpowers, the USA and the Soviet Union. Acting alone, they were small, but together? Well, together they could rebuild and maybe have a real voice on the world stage. And that idea led directly to this, the very first brick in the wall of European integration, the European Coal and Steel Community. The 6 founding members agreed to put their coal and steel under a shared supranational authority, meaning an authority that was actually above their own national governments. It was a huge first step. So with that first step taken, let's look at the architectural plans. This wasn't just a random process. They designed the economic engine of Europe in very deliberate stages. You don't just flip a switch and create a single economy, right? It was planned out in these 4 distinct stages. Each step builds on the one before it, getting more and more integrated as you go along. So stage 1 is a free trade area. The idea is simple. All the members agree, hey, no taxes on each other's stuff. But, and this is a big but, each country gets to set its own taxes, its own tariffs for any country outside the club. And that, as you'll see, creates a big problem. Check this out. It creates a massive loophole. Let's say some outside country, Distilia, wants to sell its products in Iberia. Are they going to ship it there directly and pay a huge 25% tariff? No way. They'll ship it to Vinland first, pay the much smaller 10% tariff, and then move it into Iberia for free. This is called trade diversion, and it basically breaks the system. So how do you fix that? Well, that brings us to stage 2, the customs union. You keep the free trade on the inside, but you add one crucial rule. A common external tariff. Now it doesn't matter where those goods from Distilia come in. The tax is the same everywhere. Problem solved. Now for the next big leap. This is where things get really ambitious. Stage 3 is the internal market, and it goes way beyond just physical goods. It's about creating a truly borderless space where not just goods, but also people, services, and money can move around freely. These are the famous 4 freedoms, and they're the absolute heart of the whole project. Okay, so the blueprint is in place. Time to start the actual construction. And for the EU, the building tools are treaties. Each major treaty is like a huge architectural upgrade, adding new floors, new wings, and new features to the whole structure. And you can see that whole construction history right here. It all starts with the Treaty of Rome, which laid the foundation for what was then called the European Economic Community. From there, you get a series of major upgrades. The Single European Act, Maastricht, Amsterdam, Nice, and Lisbon, that transform it into the European Union we know today. So, the Single European Act of '86 was the first big renovation. You see, that single market project we just talked about? Well, it had kind of stalled. This treaty was basically a giant kick in the pants to get it finished, setting a hard deadline of 1992 and giving the community new powers to make it happen. Then comes the real game changer, the Maastricht Treaty. This is huge. It's where the name officially changes to the European Union. It massively deepened the whole project by creating a complicated 3-pillar structure to handle new political areas like foreign policy, and it crucially paved the way for a single currency, the euro. Now, the Amsterdam and Nice treaties, think of these as the boring but absolutely essential structural reinforcements.
A huge wave of new countries from Central and Eastern Europe wanted to join, and the EU's internal plumbing just wasn't ready. These treaties were all about getting the building ready so it wouldn't collapse under the weight of all the new members.
And that brings us to the modern building we see today, shaped by the Treaty of Lisbon. This one cleaned things up. It got rid of that clunky three-pillar structure we just mentioned, merging everything into the single European Union. It also put a brand new, powerful emphasis on fundamental rights for citizens.
But let's be real. Building something this big, this ambitious, it doesn't happen without some serious arguments. There were fundamental disagreements about the design itself. And this has been the central conflict for the EU from the very beginning. It's a constant tug-of-war between widening, that's adding more countries, and deepening, that's giving more power to the center. It's the ultimate architectural debate. Should we build this house wider, or should we build it taller?
You want to talk about political drama? In the 60s, France's President Charles de Gaulle was afraid of losing his country's veto power. So what did he do? He just pulled his diplomats out of all the meetings. He literally left France's chair empty, grinding the whole organization to a halt until he got a compromise. It was a serious power play. So, after all of that, all the construction, the debates, the renovations, what's holding the whole thing together today? What's the foundation actually made of? It all boils down to this. These values, written right into Article 2 of the main treaty, are the absolute bedrock of the European Union. They aren't just suggestions, they are the non-negotiable principles that are supposed to be shared by every single member country. Which leaves us with one last big question. After more than 70 years of construction, is this unprecedented project finally finished? Or, as the treaties say, is this ever closer union actually just getting started? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.